Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Hello and welcome to So French, le podcast about France, its crazy politics and life à la française. My name is Sara Bertilsson.
And my name is Stefan de Vries.
And this week, 10 years of Macronism. What has it done to France? What is the state of the country after a decade with the famous, or should we say infamous, en même temps, at the same time strategy of Macron?
And with the last major test ahead of next year's presidential election in the pocket, how can we read the tea leaves after France's local elections?
And are we really ready for this? Céline-Mania has gripped France and the world this past week with the battle for tickets to one of Céline Dion's now 16 shows in Paris this autumn compared to the Hunger Games.
Are you going?
No, I'm not. Thank God.
Not. Okay. Well, we have something to celebrate, actually, an anniversary, but not much celebration going on, Sarah.
No, I have seen very little, very few candles being blown or fireworks or anything. Well, this week, beginning of the week, was the exact 10-year anniversary since Emmanuel Macron launched his political party or political movement called En Marche, with the initials EM, like Emmanuel Macron.
Emmanuel Macron, exactly.
Yes. En Marche, on the move. Launched from his hometown at the time, Amiens. Very modest, very few politicians or famous people around at the time. Fast forward today, 2 presidential elections later, he said at the time that the presidency wasn't really what he was looking for, going after. Well, no one really believed him. And, see where we are. But yeah, two presidential elections later, where would you say, Stéphane, with a decade of Emmanuel Macron, where does the country stand today?
Yeah, interesting question. At the time, nobody gave a lot for his new movement, but it was considered a backstabbing of the French president, François Hollande, where Macron was a minister of economy. And it would be interesting to re-listen the episode we did that week, because we were already there 10 years ago with So French. We'll put a link to the episode in the show notes. But yeah, 10 years of Macronism. Is it actually something that exists? He started with the idea that France should become a little bit like Scandinavia or the Netherlands or Germany, societies where the art of compromise is very highly regarded, where everybody goes around the table to find a solution for a problem. Not very French, where usually opposites, they tend to fight without looking for a compromise. So that was his ambition, also to modernize France, to make it a startup nation, to take care of its public finances, to make sure that the French had no reason anymore to vote for the extreme right. Well, all these ambitions, I don't know what you think, Sarah, but in 10 years, we can say all these ambitions more or less failed. The center, which he represented, neither left nor right, the famous words en même temps, at the same time. He was mocked also for that, en même temps. But that was also a reflection of his wish to bring opposites together, to find a compromise. And now 10 years later, the center is completely abandoned. We have a very clear right, which is very strong in the polls, and a very clear extreme left, which is also pretty strong in the polls. So his strategy failed, stagnation, almost complete paralysis. It is actually a very sad decade, the decade of Emmanuel Macron, Sarah.
Yeah, well, if we take those parts a little bit to get step by step, I mean, the whole idea of creating What many has been saying that what was missing in the launch of this movement was an actual ideology, an actual
Yeah.
strategy of how to get to. I mean, there were very, of course, nice, a very beautiful vision of a country united, no extremes, compromise, but there really was no roadmap on how to get there. And as you say, there is no tradition in France when it comes to compromise. So just putting this idea of compromise on top of a system that doesn't have, you know, anything to actually make it work, was it naive? Or what would you say? Was it naive, or was it just not thought through, or was there? Because some would say that behind all of this and behind all this large, you know, the vision and the words, it wasn't that centrist. It was actually a right-wing project from the beginning. I don't know how you say this.
I don't know if it was a right-wing project from the beginning. I think his intentions were real, that he really wanted to modernize France, bring people to the table, to make sure that there was some kind of social cohesion, social rest, instead of all the unrest and riots and strikes. I think his intentions were real. It was maybe naive or maybe a little bit silly that with these intentions, Emmanuel Macron forgot about the country where he wanted to run. A very divided country, a country that has a very strong history of hierarchy, who is used to authoritarian leaders. I think he mistook the country for something that it wasn't. And very quickly, we saw that as soon as he became a president, he also became isolated, but he also isolated himself. And of course, a very big test was the yellow jackets, people from the provinces protesting against high gasoline prices. He mismanaged that, and it almost cost his presidency. I think he misunderstood the country of which he became a president.
But you can also say, I mean, Emmanuel Macron is very much considered an intellectual. You know, he's very eloquent. He has this great, you know, thinking. Um,
Mhm.
But maybe I think there's very much to what you were mentioning there about not understanding the country and not actually knowing what France is, not having. I mean, first of all, there was no grassroots movement that he
No,
built
not at
this
all.
on.
No.
Was a one man show from the
Yeah,
beginning.
yeah.
So what did he actually build his idea upon? I mean, he's someone who comes from a very specific background. You know, he worked in finance, comes from a very bourgeois upbringing in a
Mhm.
very bourgeois town. Uh, well, from the north of France, but still in a very, you know, privileged, from a very privileged background. Um, so I think the whole yellow vest movement, of course, was a clash with the reality. But I also want to mention before we move on, you know, what he then, of course, his En Même Temps and the centrist project and the idea, what he said, there will be no more need for people to vote for the extremes. This was the goal of his political movement. Well, what do we say?
Yeah, well, if you look at the last elections, the municipal elections 2 weeks ago, you see that that has not really worked out. The far right is gaining strength, although losing ground in major cities. The far left, same thing. The whole center, I think there were one or two mayors who were elected that were part of his list, En Marche. So yeah, no, it's the country is more polarized, I have the impression, than it has ever been.
Yeah,
So
we've never seen so many people voting for the far left and the far right. So, I mean, if there's one thing we could say about this, I mean, that is a complete failure of
absolutely,
what he sets
yeah.
out. I mean, he has more or less. Um, I mean, the center has vanished. It barely
Yeah.
exists. I mean,
Yeah.
as you say, his own party, they have a very, like we mentioned it, a very low representation on the local level. But even what used to be the traditional centrist party, I mean, the socialists or even like the more moderate Républicains, I mean,
Mhm.
they're also losing ground. And, those who are growing and who have been showing force over the past years is, I mean, it's the far left and
Yeah.
the far right.
Yeah.
And but then can we only blame Macron for this, or is this part of a bigger picture, and maybe it's just an unfortunate coincidence with what is happening in the rest of the world as well?
Well, a bit of both, I think. Of course, he was unlucky with how the world turned out, but I think he could have been far more, let's say, present in the country itself instead of just talking behind a desk, having this very authoritarian, almost arrogant tone, not being connected to the real world. I think a part of his personality is also to blame on the current situation in France, but of course, it is a very, very polarized society. It always has been. I wouldn't want to be a president of France. I think it's just an ungovernable country. But I think his personality really played a big part in the current situation. Look alone at the public finances, which are a complete mess, far worse than when he became a president. All European countries more or less succeeded in managing their public finances, but not France, because he was simply too afraid or too arrogant to reform. He wanted to reform a little bit, and then there was opposition. He presented these reforms in a very arrogant, top-down manner. Yeah, it's
Incapable of compromise, one would
yes,
could
indeed.
even
Yeah,
say,
he
and
fell
of
into his
uniting
own
people to.
thoughts. Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, his personality is to blame, partly, but also, of course, the geopolitical and financial situation of France, which is quite, apart from the other European countries.
And so Macron leaves power next year. Is
Yeah,
this
in
the
exactly a
end?
year. Yeah.
Is this the end? Will that be the end of En Marche, or, well,
Yeah.
his political movement?
I think so. It never really took off. There's no philosophy, no idea what En Marche really is. What is Macronism? I think he will disappear together with his party, and then he will travel around the world to give lectures and presentations and maybe some consulting. Interestingly enough, for a very long time on the international scene, on the global scene, he was very well respected. Also in Europe, lots of people put lots of hope in him, but he lost that credit as well. So I'm afraid for Emmanuel Macron that his movement will go the same way as he will, and he will sail off and we'll see just a shadow in the sunset. And that's it, 10 years of Emmanuel Macron.
Well, now, speaking of elections, since our last episode, there has been the second round of the local elections here in France. No secret to no one what the results were of those here in Paris. It was set out to be a tight race between the socialist candidate Emmanuel Grégoire and the Républicain and the right-wing candidate Rachida Dati. Turned out not to be such a tight race
No,
after
not
all,
quite.
and Emmanuel Grégoire won with 51% of the vote. But remember, there was a third candidate in this race, so yeah, he was far ahead of Rachida Dati. But this is the last major test of the French public opinion
Yeah.
ahead of next year's presidential election. What do you take with you of these results for ahead of the
Well,
presidential election?
it's very hard to say, of course, what will happen because it's still a year, which is a very, very long time. I find it
And
interesting that
in a very unstable
in
international
a very
world.
absolutely very unstable international context, but the field is completely open. We see that the extremes did well, maybe not as good as they hoped, but still. Interestingly enough, Paris stayed with a socialist mayor, so that's now a quarter of a century that Paris is being led by a socialist mayor, which is interesting because if you read many media, you had the impression that everybody hated the socialist mayor and that Paris, just with all the bicycle paths and all the horrible trees that were planted,
Horrible
horrible,
trees.
that everybody
All
would
this
leave the
green
city.
everywhere.
Yes, it's
Awful.
green
And the
everywhere.
cycle.
And so, but no, actually, the people liked it. So another 6 years of a socialist mayor. So that's interesting. But also, yeah, the fact that the whole field is open, that people are very divided, that there's still a lot of oppositions, and also, bigger cities getting mayors of the right or the extreme right, like think of Nice, for instance, with Eric Ciotti. That shows that the right-wing parties are now very, very well established locally, which was always a sort of weakness. But they're in a very good position for next year's presidential election, I think.
Is that the same thing? We also saw that, the far left is making a bigger effort on having a local representatives as well. I mean, it hasn't been a priority for Jean-Luc Mélenchon from
No.
LFI until this year, where he realized, I think, that there are a lot of potential voters because there are a lot of absentees in many of the more troubled towns around France, and where there actually is a way of getting new votes. What we do see is that it's been a kind of a mixed result of
Yeah.
the left alliances that were made, because in Paris, for example, then Emmanuel Grégoire decided to not join his list with the far left candidates. That went pretty well for him, looks like it. When it comes to other cities around France, they did join and it succeeded. Others, they joined and it didn't succeed. Is there any conclusion to draw from this? Because the
No.
socialist said after the election, like, look, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, he makes the left lose. If you have the En Marche France on your list, you lose. That's not very clear, and that's
No.
not really what happened.
No,
But
the
what do you
interesting
think?
thing is that all the parties could claim victory. They were all happy that they won
And
the
they
election.
all did. They did. They
Yeah,
all
in a
claimed
way.
victory.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
But I think the most interesting results, well, there are many interesting results, but if we look at the next year's elections, then it's, of course, the result of Édouard Philippe, a former prime minister under Emmanuel Macron. He won, he was re-elected in Le Havre, the port city. So he's a mayor again. And that's an important indication for next year's elections, because Édouard Philippe, no, it's no secret that he wants to become France's next president. And he said, this is also a test. If I'm re-elected, I will run for president. And that's what happened, actually.
Well, many have been speculating whether next year's second round will stand between Jean-Luc Mélenchon and Jordan Bardella.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is that a
I
possibility?
think it will be, well, it's very early to say something, but it sounds quite possible to me that we will see a second round between Édouard Philippe and Jordan Bardella. And then Édouard Philippe will do what Jacques Chirac did in 2002. He will try to lure all the left-wing voters to support him in the second round so they can beat the extreme right.
Which is what Macron did as well in both of...
Yeah, in a way. And both Chirac and Macron, they promised stuff to the left that they never really, they never kept their promises. So the left is not silly. I also wonder if Mélenchon's party, LFI, would like to join Édouard Philippe to beat the extreme right. But it will be a very close call. And I still think it is very possible that next year we will have a President Bardella, even younger than Emmanuel Macron was, and probably as competent as Emmanuel Macron is.
Do you really think this? I must say, because I mean, he has no grounding in his. If you listen to him, I mean, how is he going to be able to be in any presidential debate, for example? Every time he's in an interview, he's only repeating the same stories. You know, he's
Yeah, yes,
reusing the
of course.
same lines, the same examples. He's like a machine repeating. It's like someone put it in somewhere, and then
Yeah.
he's spitting it out.
Robot. Yeah, no, absolutely. You're right. But you can also make a president. You can sculpt him. You can train him. There's still a year to go. Of course, a lot will depend also on the court case of Marine Le Pen. But I think he can be. I think even with saying anything substantial, he will get 35% of the votes. And
True.
that's more than enough to go to the second round. Whether it's also enough to get to the presidency, that's a whole different matter. But I think he has some real chances.
Now, Stefan,
Oui. Tell me,
did
Sarah.
you sign up?
You mean for the concerts of Céline Dion?
I mean, did you sign up to be able to try
Oh,
to get the tickets?
no, I'm
Because
sorry. Céline Dion is not my cup of tea. But I've heard that many, many people actually did.
well, Paris has been. Oh, well, I've been in Paris these past weeks, but I think maybe the whole country has been in some kind of Céline Dion mania, because at the end of the month of March, we started seeing these mysterious posters around the city. No more information, more than like black on white titles from Céline Dion's catalog of songs. And rumors started, of course, immediately. And then a week ago, on her birthday, a little bit more than a week ago, on her Céline Dion's birthday, and with an announcement on the Eiffel Tower. I'm just telling you,
Yeah.
who can announce that they are releasing, they have concerts on the Eiffel Tower? I think it's only Céline Dion who could do that. So announcing that she was going to give 10 concerts in Europe's largest arena here in Paris, the La Défense Arena. And that people had to sign up to be able to then be picked, to then be able to stand in line to get the ticket. So this is a multi-layered like filtering process.
Do you know how much these tickets are? Or
they're everything from between, I think, 90 euros to 250 or something, or even more.
Okay.
I don't know the top price, but the first, the cheapest tickets are around 80, 90 euros, I think.
Okay.
So
Okay.
expensive, of course, but for
Well,
fans.
nowadays for a pop concert, it's not very expensive. I mean, you
Yes,
already pay like
that's unfortunately
200
that is the price
Yeah.
for these kind of big concerts. But 9 million people, Stefan, 9 million signed
Why?
up.
Why?
That is
Incredible.
madness.
Yeah. But probably
And
from all
so,
around the world, I can imagine.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
listening to one interview with a representative from one of the hotel chains here, and it's like they didn't know anything, but they suddenly saw like, hold on, we're suddenly getting loads of reservations
Yeah.
for September, October. What is happening? And then they put one and one together.
Yeah.
So well, the pressure and the interest was so big that Céline Dion now has announced 6 more shows. So
Yeah,
in total,
incredible.
16 shows here in Paris, September, October. I remember when, the Taylor Swift mania, when she had her Eras tour a couple of years ago, how the whole city transformed into some kind of massive Taylor Swift fan zone. I cannot even imagine what this is going to be like
Crazy.
with all these Céline Dion fans. I'm not a fan myself, but I always find it fun to see people getting together to, unite and celebrate their favorite artists. So yeah, it's going to be a fun moment, and hopefully a little bit more of like a happy moment here in the city
So in the autumn, she's coming to Paris. 16 nights.
Yes.
October, something like that? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good luck to her. So she will come back to Paris. Another person who comes back to a prison is Nicolas Sarkozy. And no episode of So French is complete without our favorite juvenile delinquent. What did he do this week, Sarah?
I can't
Nicolas
believe that we
Sarkozy.
managed that it's possible to
Yeah,
have him in every show without even trying, without
trying.
even look like, so it just comes automatically. Well,
Yeah.
this week was the opening of his appeals trial for the Libyan funding case, where he
Hmm.
was convicted last year of having um, tried to get funds from the Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi to finance his presidential bid. He was convicted to prison. We remember
Yep.
this very well, where he went and spent 3 weeks. Was it
Hmm.
that long? Yeah,
20 days,
20 days.
but long enough to write a book
That
about his
is true. Yes.
sufferings. Oh, poor man.
Yes. But now he's there to clear his name. Yeah, what happened? Have you followed this first? I saw there has been so many people outside of the courtroom. Normally, appeals trials are not as interesting or as followed as the
No.
first trial. This one has been incredibly followed, and people are lining up outside of the Paris courthouse
Hmm.
because, well, it's a president, and this is kind of a very exceptional case as well. But yeah, have you followed it? What has he been saying this
Yeah, a
time
little
around?
bit, a little bit. He, well, he stands trial, not only him, but also I think 10 accomplices. Amongst them, his very old friends. I think even from childhood, Claude Guéant and Brice Hortefeux, both ministers when Sarkozy was a president. And during the hearing this week, Sarkozy seemed visibly irritated when he was asked why his chief of staff, Claude Guéant, and also his minister Brice Hortefeux had quietly traveled to Tripoli in 2005, more than 20 years ago, to meet Gaddafi's intelligence chief. And his answer, conveniently, essentially, no, nothing to do with me, c'est pas moi. And that's, of course, very convenient, because if his aides cut a deal with the dictator to move cash into his campaign, then Sarkozy's defense rests entirely on the fact that he did not know anything about it, je ne sais quoi, which either makes him innocent or makes him the most clueless president in the French Republican history.
Yeah, this is a typical case of throwing your friends under the bus. Is that what?
Incredible. Yeah. On the not only under the bus, under the Paris metro, under the TGV, everything that has. And what was also interesting, that he had a very courteous behavior towards the judges. He was relatively humble, if Sarkozy can
Yeah,
be
less aggressivity,
less
less
aggressive.
aggressive
Yeah.
than
So
last time.
yeah, it's he of course tries to do anything that will keep him out of prison. But I did not have the impression that the judges were really convinced. This appeal runs until June the 3rd, and the verdict is expected in the autumn. So maybe Céline Dion can sing if he is, innocent.
Or he can go
But
to the concert, maybe, to
yeah,
celebrate.
maybe. Yeah, and otherwise we can
If
pay
he
Sarkozy.
signed up, if he signed up,
Yeah.
get the tickets.
And otherwise we can visit him in jail, because if Sarkozy is convicted, he faces up to 10 years in prison. And of course, Carla Bruni was also in the courtroom, standing by her man. She looked composed, but Nicolas a bit less.
Hmm. Well, I think there will be moments, there'll be time for us to talk about this trial again in one of
I'm
our
afraid
future
so. Yes, indeed.
episodes.
Yeah.
For now, though, this show is over. We will be back in 2 weeks, though, with a new episode. Until then, you can follow us on, you can download our previous episodes and this episode where you normally get your podcasts, and also on YouTube. It's at So French Show. If you search for that, you should find us, or through the link on our Instagram. And make sure to follow us so that you don't miss any of our upcoming shows.
Yeah, and please share this episode with your friends and family. And if you have any questions or suggestions for topics, shoot us an email. The address is bonjour@sofrench.show.
The So French podcast is presented and produced by me, Sarah Bertilsson.
And by me, Stefan de Vries. And this podcast's original music is made by Laurent Blo. We're back in 2 weeks with a new episode. Until then, take care. Au revoir.
Au revoir.